America is in shambles, and who do you trust to fix it? Well, guess what? We've tried those types of people, and they failed us. So we need someone who won't fail. And there's no one I trust more than Jerry the Rock. Jerry is a hard-working soul. He always looks out for the little guys, and he is immune to corruption, for his spirit is rock solid. This country needs help, and Jerry will make it rock. Jerry the Rock for president.
Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. Election years are always stressful, but it's good to know we have an actually good candidate running this year. There's been a lot of great presidents over the years, and a lot of bad ones. You've got William Harrison, who died a month in, or Abraham Lincoln, who put the country back together. You know something's truly great when it changes history forever, just like Super Mario 64 when it released in 1996, or Albert Einstein when he invented the light bulb. What do you mean that wasn't him?
Super Mario 64. Viva la revolution! It's been overstated to death, but this was one of the most revolutionary games ever made. It was mind-blowing when it first came out, and people have been talking about it for decades. So, just what makes this game so special, and how did they come up with it in the first place? Well, it was originally conceived in the early 90s by Shigeru Miyamoto while he was working on Star Fox. Star Fox utilized the SNES's Super FX chip, which allowed for 3D polygonal graphics, something that wasn't seen often at the time, and if it was, it required some sort of complex add-on. Miyamoto originally envisioned the game for the SNES, but he decided to rework the idea for the N64 due to its more powerful hardware. Development lasted for roughly 2 years, from 1994 to 1996, much longer than many other games at the time. Hell, months were spent working on the game's perspective and camera system alone. The development team also prioritized working out Mario's moveset. Miyamoto wanted to include more detail than any of the previous Mario games and almost make it feel like a playable cartoon. This was one of the earliest titles developed for the N64, so it was very new territory for everyone involved. Almost everything in the game was designed by in-house Nintendo employees since it was their first time working with full 3D graphics and they didn't want to outsource anything. It was developed alongside The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but since that game needed a lot more work, they actually took some puzzles and incorporated them into Mario 64. The music was once again composed by Koji Kondo, and the sound design was handled by Yoji Inagaki, who ended up creating hundreds of sound effects for this game. Super Mario 64 was released as a launch title for the Nintendo 64 on June 23rd, 1996 in Japan, September 29th in North America, and March 1st, 1997 in PAL regions. Surprisingly, it wasn't a pack-in game like the previous Mario launch titles were, but that ended up not mattering, as it still became the best-selling N64 game ever, with just under 12 million copies sold. And it got universal acclaim upon release. Like I said, this game was groundbreaking when it first came out, and while its reception has become a bit more mixed nowadays, it's still regarded as a classic. It would end up being fully remade for the Nintendo DS in 2004, and it was also included in the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection released for the Switch in 2020.
Super Mario 64 actually means a lot to me. When I first started becoming interested in retro games, this was one of the ones I wanted to play the most. I don't know why, but something about it just really grabbed me, and it's the reason the N64 was the first retro console I ever got. I received it as a Christmas present alongside Super Mario 64, and let me tell you, that was awesome. Also, don't ask why it looks like someone spilled coffee on the cartridge. I don't know why. That's just how it looked when my mom gave it to me. I played through this game a couple of times before, once on the original cartridge and once on the 3D All-Stars collection, and while it had some problems, I overall had a blast with it. It's been over 35 years since this game released though, so the question is it still worth playing in this day and age? Let's check it out.
We open with one of the most iconic lines in gaming history.
It's me, Mario!
We're then greeted by a 3D render of Mario's head, and we can even grab parts of his face and mess around with them. It doesn't really add much, but it's pretty endearing. After picking a save file, we get our story. Peach sends Mario a letter asking him to come to the castle as she's baked a cake for him. Without hesitation, Mario hops out of a pipe right outside of Peach's castle, implying that he actually lives in the sewers. This is actually a really great intro, since you're free to run around the outside of the castle and get used to Mario's new moveset. It's pretty fun, and a much better way of introducing the game's mechanics than a tutorial where everything is slowly explained to you. The only explanation we get is this Lakitu, which is a way of personifying the game's camera. I think this is pretty clever, since this was one of the first games to use a manual camera function. Upon entering the castle, Mario is told to go away. Speaking with a toad reveals that Bowser has, big shock, kidnapped Princess Peach, and he's stolen the castle's power stars, which are the source of its energy. He's hidden them all over the place and sealed himself away, so Mario must travel around the castle and collect as many stars as possible to stop Bowser and save Peach. The story is another save the princess plot, but it is unique in that the entire game essentially takes place in the castle. Peach's castle serves as the hub world, and inside each room is a painting. Each painting contains its own world, and by jumping inside it, Mario can enter that world and reclaim the stars. And that's pretty much the main point of the game. Each level is a large open world for you to explore. Okay, by modern standards, it's not very large, but for the time, these were huge. While previous Mario games were linear stages that you just had to get to the end of, this one has you explore and complete certain objectives for stars. Each level has a bunch of areas, and once you complete a challenge, you're rewarded with a power star. Grab it, you then exit the painting, and can hop back in for another one. This is a pretty radical shift from the 2D Mario formula, but what's interesting is that it apparently wasn't going to be this way. It was originally going to be closer to something like Crash Bandicoot, where we had a bunch of different levels and you just had to get to the end, but since the N64 cartridges couldn't hold enough memory, they opted for having fewer, larger levels that have multiple objectives in them. And I think that paid off, as it almost entirely created the formula that most 3D platformers would use going forward.
Mario's big jump to 3D changed almost everything, from the way the levels are designed, to the visuals, to how the game controls. All of it is vastly different than what we saw previously.
Well, this wasn't the first fully 3D game ever made, it was the first one to have this much going on. Sure, the graphics have aged a lot, but I think it has some charm to how it looks. The textures are simple, but the colors are very vibrant, and the levels all have some great atmosphere to them. And I really love the character models in this game. They're just so simple, yet the jank actually makes them look really funny. I also love the soundtrack of this game. While some of the levels reuse themes, they are really pleasant to listen to, with the best ones easily being the most common theme of the game, Bob-omb Battlefield, which is actually used in 3 other levels, and the theme used in the first 2 water stages. It's just so majestic and wonderful. This is also the first time Mario has a voice provided by the iconic Charles Martinet, who technically made his debut in Mario's Game Gallery, which was a PC game of a bunch of board and card games. He doesn't use full sentences though, it's mostly just grunts, yahs, and wahoos, but it is fun to listen to, and it's much more than someone like Crash or Link. He'll even fall asleep and dream about pasta if you don't move for a while. It might be simple, but Martinet's performance is just delightful, and there's a reason it's the voice everyone associates with Mario, especially since he would end up voicing the character for over 25 years until just this past year with the release of Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
For those who are less familiar with gaming history, I'm sure you're wondering why this game was so revolutionary when it first came out. Well, the answer is quite simple. This.
Again, this wasn't the first 3D platformer to ever release, as it was predated by Jumping Flash on the PS1, but it was the first one to take full advantage of an analog stick instead of a traditional D-pad. As a result, we can now move in any direction. There were some games that did similar stuff to this, but not on this level, and it was mind-blowing back in 1996. Because we have a joystick now, there's no longer a run button. Mario's movement speed is all about how far you push it. Push it gently, and he'll just slowly walk, and pushing it all the way causes him to run. Mario's moveset has been hugely expanded thanks to us having 3 primary buttons to work with. The A button lets you jump, the B button lets you punch, yes, you can actually punch enemies in this game, and the Z button lets you crouch. When you combine the buttons with the joystick though, that's where the moveset really shines. If you run and press the jump button right as you land, you can do both a double jump and a triple jump, which let you gain some extra height. Pushing the B button 3 times lets you do a 3-hit combo of punches and kicks. If you crouch and jump, you can do a backflip for some extra height, though not as much as the triple jump. You can climb poles and grab onto ledges to save yourself. If you run against a wall and hit the A button, you can perform a wall jump. If you press the Z button in the air, you do a ground pound, which can break things and hurt enemies. If you jump and press the B button, you can do a jump kick. If you're running and hit the B button, you do a dive maneuver, which isn't that useful since you slide around a lot. If you hold the Z button and move, you can crawl, which isn't that great because of how slow it is. If you run, flick the joystick in the other direction, and jump, you can do a somersault, which is like the backflip, only you don't stop moving. You can grab and throw certain enemies with the B button. If you crouch and press the B button, you do this breakdance kick, which can hurt enemies, but it's more funny than useful. And if you run, crouch, and jump, you can do everybody's favorite move in this game, the long jump. It can be a great way to move faster and clear some big distance, but I really don't see why people lose their minds over this thing, since it can be hard to aim at times.
Mario's new moves add a lot to the game, since they let you clear obstacles in a much larger amount of ways, but sadly, one of the most impressive things about this game when it first released leads to one of its biggest issues when playing it nowadays.
While this game's use of analog movement was impressive for the time period, it hasn't aged all too gracefully. The N64 controller is not very precise, and as a result, this game's controls can be really awkward to go back to. Mario's movement can be really heavy, which isn't a huge deal when you're running around, but when the platforming gets tight, especially later in the game, it can get really frustrating. The biggest issue is the turning. If you push the joystick in the opposite direction you're going, Mario will instantly snap in that direction, but only if you're not moving. If you are even slightly going forward, he'll instead walk in a small circle to face the other direction, and if you're on a tiny platform, that can lead to death. So you need to be really careful in these moments, and some of them require you to move fast. fast. This is by far the most annoying aspects of the game, and during my first playthrough, it caused so many deaths. Now, I will admit, you do get used to it. Eventually, I was able to adapt to this game's controls, and it didn't give me as much trouble as previously, but it still got annoying at times. Especially during the later parts of the game where the platforming gets way more intense. The controls aren't horrible, but they are a bit awkward compared to later games like Galaxy and Odyssey, which isn't the game's fault, but it can be frustrating if you're used to those titles. The other annoying thing is that some abilities don't always work. The abilities you need to do while you're running aren't easy to do on small ledges. The wall jump is wildly inconsistent since you need to hit it at just the right angle and with the right speed, otherwise you'll bounce right off. Sometimes Mario just won't grab a ledge. If you're on a moving platform, sometimes you can't jump, and sometimes Mario will slip and fall off a platform for no reason. These things don't happen often, but they can be really frustrating when they do.
Aside from the controls, the biggest complaint this game gets from people nowadays is the camera. And yeah, I think that's fair.
Like I said, this was the first game to have a manual camera feature, and much like the controls, it can be pretty janky. You operate the camera with the C buttons. Left and right spin the camera, down zooms it out to give you a wider view, and up zooms in to let you look all around yourself. You can also push the R button to put it directly behind Mario, but it automatically positions itself whichever way you're facing, so you only want to use it on straight, narrow platforms. When you move the camera, it only moves in set intervals, and as a result, it can end up in some funky angles. On top of that, it'll just stop altogether after a while, meaning there are some things you straight up can't see. Because of this, you can't always get the most optimal angle, and it can lead to you misaiming some jumps, and it gets worse when you're trying to land on stuff below you that you can't see. There are some areas where you can move the camera all around you, but for the most part, you only have a few options. Okay, I think that's enough complaining for now. Let's get back to the good stuff. Peach's Castle is honestly a really good hub world. Not only is everything close together, so you can easily get to where you're going, but there is a lot of stuff to do, and if you want, you can just screw around in here. This applies to the rest of the game too. It's really fun to just go off the beaten path and explore. There's all kinds of cool techniques you can discover, like some enemies will cause you to spin and float down. You can find Koopa shells, which you ride on like a skateboard, or move faster in the water for a few seconds, and almost every level has a red bomb you can speak to activate a cannon, which you can shoot yourself out of for more height. Because of this, a lot of the stars have more than one method of getting them. Like I said earlier, you travel around the castle looking for levels. Most of them are in paintings, but there are some in other places like a cage, a puddle, and even just a wall. When you enter a level, you're given a hint of the next star on the list, but the cool thing about this game is that whichever star you select doesn't have to be the one you grab. When you're thrown into a level, you're free to go wherever you want, and you can get any power star you want. With a few exceptions, there are some that only appear if you select the appropriate mission. There's 120 power stars in the game, but only 70 of them are required to beat it. And since each power star has the same value as the other ones, you can get whichever one you want, which makes this game infinitely replayable since you can experiment more or avoid any stars you hate getting.
But of course, that's just the casual mindset. If you want to see everything this game has to offer, you gotta go for 100%, and believe me, that is easier said than done.
We've got 15 total courses in the game, and each of them contains 7 power stars. While the levels feel pretty differently, they do have some stars that are similar. The first star usually involves running through the whole course to get you familiar with your surroundings, a handful of them have boss fights, and all of the levels have a star you get by collecting 8 red coins. Not only are there a lot of stars to collect, but this game can honestly be pretty hard at points. The platforming in the later levels can get pretty frickin' intense, and because of how stiff the controls are, it can lead to a decent amount of deaths. Every time you die, you're shot out of the painting and have to start over. And with a few exceptions, there's no checkpoints in these levels. On top of that, your coins don't carry over anymore, so if you die or get a star, your coin count resets, meaning you won't be collecting 100 coins as often, and as a result, you won't have as many extra lives. Getting a game over sends you back to the title screen, and thankfully you can save after every star so you don't lose any progress, but it's still really annoying. Luckily, the levels still have 1-up mushrooms, so if you can find one, get it. It'll save you so much trouble. You also get an extra life for beating a level with 50 coins, but that's only after you get a star. This game also completely reworked the health system. We have an actual health meter this time. You lose health when you get hit by an enemy, but you refill it by collecting coins or running through one of these hearts. I vastly prefer this over the power-up system since it means your health is fully restored every time you die. You still die instantly if you fall in a pit, but it is much better than before. Sadly, Mario isn't as durable as he used to be since he now takes fall damage unless you ground pound right before you land, and he can even drown when you're swimming. You don't have an air meter, instead your health gradually lowers when you're underwater and it refills when you reach the surface.
Because you have a health meter now, all of the traditional power-ups like the mushroom and the fire flower have been removed. We do have some new ones, but they work completely differently.
The power-ups come in the form of different hats. By hitting these switches in hidden areas, you can activate these blocks that appear all over the game. Unlike older power-ups, these ones are primarily used to get specific stars, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it adds a bit more variety to the puzzles, but on the other hand, it makes them feel really situational. You're very rarely going to use the power-ups unless they're required for a certain star. On top of that, they all have a time limit, so when you do use them, you're racing against the clock. We have 3 hats total, and each of them have their own corresponding box color. The red box contains the wing cap, which is the one you'll be using the most. It gives Mario wings on its head, head, and it allows him to fly when he does a triple jump or shoots out of a cannon. But it's nowhere near as good as the raccoon tail or cape, since after you take off, you're more gliding than flying and have to manage your speed and altitude, which makes it hard to go higher. The blue box contains the vanish cap, which makes Mario invisible, and it's by far the least useful. You can run through enemies and certain walls, but it has by far the shortest time limit, and there's only 5 stars in the entire game that actually require this. And the green box contains the metal cap, which turns Mario into metal. You kill enemies instantly, can walk through toxic gas, and sink to the bottom of water. It's mildly useful, but it's still not very good.
But there is one key thing I haven't mentioned yet. If you look at the stage select screen, you'll see there's only 6 stars instead of 7. So where's the other one, you might ask?
Well, that's where we get to what is easily the most frustrating aspect of completing this game 100%, the 100 coins stars. Remember how I said you wouldn't be getting 100 coins as often? I think the developers knew that because they made it so you get an extra star if you do manage to collect 100 coins. And since your coins reset every time you beat a level, you have to deliberately hunt down as many coins as possible. This sucks. I already mentioned how most of the levels don't have checkpoints, but getting any other star in the game doesn't take too long, and as a result, dying doesn't feel like much of a punishment. But getting the 100 coin star can take up to 10 to 15 minutes, and if you die when you have 70 to 90, it can be agonizing knowing you have to do that whole thing all over again. Some of these levels barely have any coins in them, and you can wind up scouring every inch of the map just to get enough. It's not just about coins on the ground or in the air. You also get coins from defeating enemies. There's the red coins I went on about, which are worth 2 coins instead of just 1, and most of the levels have these switches that make blue coins appear. These are worth 5 coins apiece, which is great, but they vanish after a few seconds, so you gotta get them quickly. You also need to be careful because the star appears right above Mario's head, and depending on the location, it can be literally impossible to grab, meaning you have to do the 100 coin star twice. These are the only stars that don't eject you from the level, so you can grab them and then get another star, but getting these things is easily the worst part of the game. I know they're technically optional, but I still don't think they were designed very well.
Now we should get into the actual levels.
Up first is Bob-omb Battlefield. It's a pretty solid first level. It's a large grassy field, you got some cool hazards, a giant chain chomp, a Koopa you can race, and even a boss fight against King Bob-omb. He's really easy, just get behind him, pick him up, and throw him. Do this 3 times, and he's dead. Yeah, every boss in this game goes down in 3 hits. Next is Whomp's Fortress, a large stony castle filled with these giant blocks called Whomps, not to be confused with Thwomps. I think it would have been better if this level was called Thwomp's Fortress, but whatever. There's a giant Whomp at the top of the fortress that you butt slam 3 times, and there's even an owl you can grab onto and fly around. Jolly Roger Bay is our first water level, and I'll say it again, I absolutely love the music. There's a sunken pirate ship, some clams, and of course a giant eel that is one of the many reasons 90s kids are afraid of the ocean now. Cool Cool Mountain is an ice level that's very vertical driven, and as a result it can be kinda hard to navigate. I remember hating this level when I first played it, but now it's not that bad. There's a cabin that takes you to this ice slide, and you literally have to do this twice, once just regularly and then again racing this giant penguin. It's not awful, but it can be pretty frustrating. We also have a giant snowman, and this mother penguin that lost her baby.
I think we all know what to do here.
Peach's castle is divided into 3 areas, and each of them end with a Bowser stage. That's everything on the first floor, so let's check it out. These are more like the traditional Mario levels, as they're pure platforming challenges, and they can be pretty tricky. But on the right side, these are some of the few areas you can move the camera all over the place. Jump in this pipe, and we have to fight Bowser. Yikes, that model didn't age well. He just spits fire at you and occasionally teleports. You have to grab his tail, spin him around, and then throw him into one of the bombs all around the area. It's pathetically easy, unless you're me, and absolutely terrible at getting the timing right. Beating him gives you a key and lets you access the basement. But first we have to go in the courtyard, which is filled with booze. Shame Luigi isn't in this game, or he would have been able to deal with these. Killing this one spawns this cage that lets you access Big Boo's Haunt, the scariest thing the N64 was capable of. Yeah, people have joked about how this level was considered really scary for years, and by modern standards it's nothing, but I at least admit the music, or lack of music, is kinda creepy. And if you don't know what's coming, the piano is a legit jump scare. Also, apparently the boos in this game were inspired by Takashi Tezuka's wife and how she exploded in anger at him at one point. I don't know if this is true, but I find it too hilarious to not mention. You can actually harm boos in this level, unlike previous games. You have not 1, but 2 fights against Big Boo, who just takes more hits. We have these weird floating eyes, and a merry-go-round. Honestly, I really like this level. I love the haunted house aesthetic, and it makes for some cool challenges. Now let's go to Lethal Lava Land, another level I used to hate. And okay, I still don't like it, but it wasn't as bad this time around. As you'd expect, the level is filled with lava, and thankfully it's not instant death, but it still does a lot of damage. There's also a lot of fire enemies in here, and fire is the worst because it makes Mario run forward for a few seconds, which can lead to death. But at the very least, this level has the easiest red coins in the game. You have to fight this big bully twice by knocking it into the lava, and at one point I literally did it by accident. And there's a volcano in the middle you can hop into to grab some stars. Still not a fan of this level, but it's not as bad as I remember.
Now the next level, on the other hand, I hate even more than when I first played it.
This wall may seem pretty normal, but it actually holds the portal to Shifting Sandland, and I don't know if this is a popular opinion, but I think this is the worst level in the game. It's a desert level, which doesn't sound bad, but it's filled with instant death quicksand, so you need to be really careful, and getting around is a pain. There's this vulture that can steal your hat, which causes you to take double damage, and the only way to get it back is to jump into him over the aforementioned quicksand. And to top it off, this is one of the worst 100 coin stars in the game. There are barely any coins in this level, and there's a pyramid in the center you have to go into to get 100. Problem is, once you enter, you can't leave, so if you go in and don't have enough coins, you have to start all over. I really hate this level. I guess the pyramid is kinda neat, but it's not very fun to explore. If you step on the pillars outside, you open the top of the pyramid where you fight the eye rock, these giant stone hands with eyes in the center. They try to push you around, and you have to hit them 3 times each. It's probably the hardest fight in the game, but it's still pretty easy with some practice.
Also, genuine question, does anyone actually like desert levels in games? It is one of the most overused level themes in video game history, and yet I never see anyone say they like them. Hell, they get criticized more often than water levels. So why do games keep using them?
Anyways, diving into this liquid metal brings us to Hazy Maze Cave. This is the biggest level in the game, to the point where they literally give you a map. The level is a giant cave with a bunch of branching paths, and it's pretty forgettable. Aside from this elevator, toxic gas, which is only seen in this level, and this portal to a bonus area where you get the metal cap. Yeah, the other 2 caps you found in the castle, but this one is in Hazy Maze Cave. No idea why. That may seem like everything in the basement, but then we open the Bowser door and have this blue wall, which takes us to Dire Docks, another water level. Still love the music, but this level is tiny and super bland. Only thing of note is a submarine, and there's some things that won't appear until after you fight Bowser. Speaking of which, the second Bowser level has lava, and that's all of note. This fight is exactly the same as last time, only he can make the stage tilt upward. We get another key, and now we can finally go upstairs. Wet Dry World is yet another water level, but it's pretty unique since you can raise and lower the water with these switches, and don't worry, it's nowhere near as tedious as the water temple from Ocarina of Time. You can even change the water levels by how high you jump into the painting. There's this underwater city, which is pretty cool, and thanks to these 10 coin boxes, I was able to get the 100 coin star without even trying. Easily the best level in the game. Tall Mountain is some kind of hill, I think? Yeah, this level's pretty generic and kinda lame. You climb the mountain, there's a slide for some reason, and even monkeys. Okay, I take it back, this level's awesome. Snowman's Land. Did we really need 2 snow levels? Well, this one's less vertical than Cool Mountain, but there's an ice lake that hurts you, an ice bully that's the same as the ones in Lethal Lava Land, a giant snowman that'll blow you away, and even an igloo, which is miserable to get to, and entering it is the only time in the game you need to crawl.
Well, it still accomplished more than William Harrison.
We then reach my most conflicting level in this game, Tiny Huge Island. This level actually has 2 versions of itself, one where everything is enormous and one where everything is minuscule. Which one you're in is determined by which painting you select, but you can also switch between them by jumping in these pipes. I love the concept, but I hate the layout. Half of the map has a giant canyon for no reason, so if you're not careful, it's really easy to die, and the 100 coin star takes forever. We have a rematch with Koopa the Quick and the easiest boss in the game, this giant wiggler you jump on 3 times and he doesn't even attack you. Now we can access the very top floor, which fittingly holds the 2 hardest levels in the game. Tick-Tock Clock is inside the castle's clock, and a really creative level since it's filled with pendulums, pistons, conveyors, gears, and whatever these shapes are supposed to be. And what's really neat is depending on where the clock hand is when you enter, you control the speed of these machine parts, and you can even stop them altogether. This is the most vertical level in the game, as you're constantly climbing upward, and there is no bottom, so one wrong move at any time can lead to instant death. This is absolutely the worst 100 coin star, not only because of that, but because I swear this has the least amount of coins in any level. I want to like Tick-Tock Clock, but it is so frustrating. Jumping into this window and finding this hole has the final level in the game, Rainbow Ride. You're in the sky and have to ride these magic carpets along rainbows. Much like Tick-Tock Clock, one wrong move can lead to instant death, and a lot of the level is automated, which means it can take a while to get back to where you were. But there are some cool places like an airship and a flying castle, and thankfully the 100 coin star isn't as bad since the coins are a lot closer together, though you do need to make sure you pick the right path.
But the few of you that actually like doing math probably realized that 15 courses with 7 stars each gives us 105 power stars, and if there's 120 total, that leaves 15 extra stars unaccounted for. Well, that's where Peach's Castle comes into play.
Yes, the castle has exactly 15 additional power stars hidden inside it. Each of the cap courses has a red coin star, so that's 3. All 3 Bowser levels have a red coin star as well, so that gives us 6. There's 3 Toads that will give you a star if you talk to them, so that's 9. There's this aquarium with a red coin star, that's 10. There's a slide that has 2 stars, one just for finishing it, and another for finishing it in under 21 seconds. Now we have 12. There's this bunny you have to catch in the basement twice, which puts us at 14. And finally, we have another secret course, which is one of the hardest stars stars in the game. You have to fly to these clouds and collect red coins with the wing cap, and you can very easily screw up. Here's a tip: always restock your wing cap when you can, and ground pound on the clouds so you don't slip off, because if you do, you land outside and have to run through the castle all over again. That's almost all of them. Let's take on the last Bowser stage. It's slightly harder than the other stages, but still not very unique. Love the music though, and boom, that's the last star. Let's finish this. This time, Bowser rains fire down on you, and you have to throw him 3 times instead of 1. And the last time, the stage crumbles, so you have to get the speed and timing down perfectly, or end up throwing him into the wrong bomb. I'll take it. Bowser gives up 1 last star that doesn't affect the counter, and Mario returns to the castle entrance. Peach is freed from her prison and thanks Mario for saving her. She gives him a kiss on the nose and decides to finally bake that cake she promised him. The credits roll, and we go through all the locations we saw. That's great. I love it when games do stuff like this. Plus, the credits music is some of the best in the game. We see the delicious-looking cake, and Mario thanks us.
Thank you so much for playing my game.
You're quite welcome, Mr. Mario, but we're not done just yet. Upon collecting every star in the game, this cannon in front of the castle opens and you can shoot onto the roof. Here we find Yoshi, who gives us a thank you message from the developers and 100 lives. Admittingly, this isn't that useful since we now have every star, but I think it shows that a large part of the fun of this game is just screwing around, and now we can do that without the fear of a game over. You can also grab this wing cap and fly around outside the castle, but Yoshi also gives the triple jump these sparkles, and we can have a rematch with the penguin, who's now fat, or really his model is just squished a bit. That was fun, but I think we're done here.
Game conquered. Super Mario 64 is a bit clunky and unforgiving at times, but it's still a really fun game. I can see some people being turned off by the controls, but I think it overall holds up really well. The levels are creative, the gameplay is engaging, and it's just overall a really solid package. If you're a fan of Mario, I think this game is still worth playing, even today. Oh, right. I should probably talk about the 3D All-Stars version. It's the exact same game but with a higher resolution. Now as for the DS remake, I think I'm gonna save that for another time, because playing this monumental game has inspired me to leave my mark in a very similar way. That's right, I am going to change the world by becoming the first man to get up breathing! Oh, am I kidding? I can't do it, it just feels too good.